All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Puppet Time Online with Eric Wright. I'm Eric Wright. I'm your host. And this is hosted by also the Puppet Kitchen. So I'm really happy to have you all here. I'm really happy to see you. I got a new haircut, looking fresh, thanks to Katie Denny, who's sitting right over here. And she's monitoring all your questions that are coming in. If you guys have questions, type them into the chat, and she'll shout them out. She keeps me on track also, and that way I don't have to be reading all of your comments as you go. But I'm super excited to start this show today. First of all, new haircut, new theme song, which is so exciting. We may or may not have been flagged by the robots for our last theme song, Bubbles in the Wine, which I really loved, but it was only a matter of time, really. This one is the intro to a song called Shake Your Shaker by a band called the Big Littles, which is my friend Matt Singer and my friend Liam Hurley. They are in a band for kids, and they do some great stuff. So check out Big Littles on Spotify and on YouTube and all over the place. And they were kind enough to lend us the beginning of one of their songs for our new intro. So I'm really excited to have our guest on the show today. We're going to be talking to one of my favorite people in the whole world, Mr. Phillip Huber. And, we'll see if we can get him on the call here. We did have some technical difficulties with him earlier when we were trying to do our test. So we'll see. It's live TV. What are we going to do? If it works, great. We'll talk to Phillip today. And if not, then we'll, yeah, I hear you, Teddy. I'm pretty sure that hubheads is the official term for people who are standing Phillip Huber. But as soon as I see him join the chat here, then we'll get him in. Anyways, I'm super excited that you're all here. For people who are new to Puppet Time Online, this is really just a chance to talk to people who know what they're talking about in a time of uncertainty. I think that's really what it comes from. When everybody went inside a couple months ago, we were all full of uncertainty, and I was sort of like, I want to, hear what people have to say when they know what they're talking about. I know a lot about puppets, so I started a show about puppets, and as you can see, there's a lot of puppets around me, and I know a lot of people who are experts in puppets, and I'm especially interested in talking to the people who are sort of on the outside of the puppetry community. Now, obviously, Phillip is very much in the puppetry community and has been a puppeteer for a long time. There he is. He just joined. So we're going to get him in, and we'll find out all about it. Cross your fingers that all this is here. And what happened? Let's see. Oh, hi, Julia. Julia just joined. Teddy's here. So many people are here. Great. Great. Phillip, I can hear you okay. This is as far as we got last time. We'll see if we get your video this time.
It
and if
doesn't
not,
look like
you can just say hi to everybody.
Doesn't look good. I'm frozen on screen there. Hello, everybody. Do you want to try another phone?
Well, I tell you what. I think it might be that we'll have to try it another time. But I'm really happy to say hello to you, and we'll figure it all out. There's all this technology going on, but I tell you what we can do. I'm going to just bump you out of here so it doesn't keep trying to connect with you. But one of the things that we were thinking about doing as a plan B was to make a Zoom chat with Phillip and I, and because that seems to work pretty flawlessly, and then we could just send you guys the link to that Zoom chat via Instagram, because you guys are all watching anyway. He's trying to join in again. So let's try this other way where he requests, and then I ask and then I say yes, rather than the other way around. My dad is suggesting that we could use a puppet to stand in for Phillip. Oh my gosh, we have some video. And it's video of me. Wait, turn your camera around.
You're reversed.
We're trying that on another phone.
Oh, you tried it on another phone. That's great. Well, if you turn your camera around, then we can see. Oh, I understand. Maybe it's the front camera that doesn't want to work. Wait, now we're talking. Now we're, yay!
Should we do headphone on? So you can turn the
Perfect.
headphone.
Oh my gosh,
it's not
it's
going
working.
through the headphone. Yeah, except it's not going through the headphone now.
Hold on.
If you just take the head, can you hear me? Can you hear me without the headphones though?
Yes, I can hear
great.
you.
Then forget it.
Can you
It's
hear
just
me?
great.
Okay.
We can hear you. It's going to be great. Who have you got helping you here, Philip? Oh, cutting in and out.
Famous last words.
I know, right?
Where did you meet Philip?
So Philip and I met many, many years ago at the Puppeteers of America Festival in Los Angeles. It was either the national festival or a regional festival. Maybe Philip remembers better than I. And it was years and years and years ago. I was there with Paul Messner from Kansas City. I was working my very first puppetry job. And Paul was one of the featured performers. We were performing a show called 10 Things You Should Never Do with a Puppet. And Philip, I believe you were performing some of your cabaret acts there as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm trying to recall. I believe so.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that that's the first time that I saw you perform live for sure. And then I think we actually met during, like, very briefly at one of the late night cabarets. We were both in the audience. I can't remember if you were performing in that or not. I certainly wasn't. I was just a kid. I was so delighted and terrified to be around all these incredible puppeteers. But then we got to work together later at the O'Neill Puppetry Conference in 2004, I think. Is that right?
That's right. You came and studied there at the
Yeah.
O'Neill with me, and you had a great time. You had
That's
a little old guy listening to a radio.
That's right. In fact, I still have that puppet. I brought it out today so that we could take a look at it. So obviously, you know as much as I do that marionettes are a little tricky to hold up
there he
onto a
is.
camera like this, but right?
Yeah, that brings back lots
That's
of memories. That's wonderful.
And as I recall, so I had built this marionette when I was at Sarah Lawrence College. It was my senior year at Sarah Lawrence College, and I built this marionette just kind of as a practice, and had come up with an idea to make him a tap dancer, that kind of a thing. And I brought him to the marionette strand at the O'Neill National Puppetry Conference, where you were leading this track in the conference. And
Yeah,
I
for
remember we
marionette
got together
manipulation.
and you looked at these hands and immediately said, "Oh my gosh, you've designed a puppet you've designed a string puppet that is designed to catch every string possible." And so we went through on every one of his little things that stuck out and put little guard strings on his hands, on his
That's
face.
right.
We closed off his shoulder joints. I mean, there was just so much that I learned just in that, in that week. It was incredible. And we worked together on making this, on this little bit that I've performed since a bunch of times.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
Yeah.
I love to hear that students continue to use puppets in different ways. But that's a great part of the learning to do as well as what to do when and we go through things and we find what's not working, and then we try and make it work. And that's something that very really think about is guard strings. Marionette people need to think about guard strings frequently, because they will design puppets with costume pieces with flowers on them and things like that, and the strings will brush across there and just get tangled up in it. And they don't realize that they can put like a wire guard or a string guard across, things like that, to keep the marionette strings themselves from catching on those things. So it's a good lesson.
Yeah. Now, did you can you tell me a little bit about how you got started in puppetry? Did you have somebody like I had with you to sort of walk you through how to work out, you know, how to make a marionette, or how did you get started?
We're having some delay right now on the video. It's coming through, but you're asking about my beginnings in puppetry, correct?
That's right. Yeah. How did you get started?
You know, my very first puppet I received when I was 3 years old, and it was a little Steiff dog hand puppet that my mother gave me. And she noticed that I was very shy, even at age 3, I guess. And so she gave that to me, and right away that was something that piqued my interest. And I would climb behind the sofa in the living room, and I would put the puppet up to the back of the sofa, and I'd wait for somebody to walk through the living room, and then the dog would start barking at them or doing whatever to get their attention. And that was my first attempts at doing show with puppets. And then flash forward to when I was 5 years old, 5 or 6, and my mother collected green stamps. That was a big thing back then. You would have books, and every time you bought groceries at the grocery store, they'd give you these stamps, and you'd put them in a book. And when you had so many books filled, you could actually get a gift with that. And we went into the green stamp center, looking at what she was going to get, and of course I spotted a Howdy Do Marionette. And that's what I wanted. And mother was really upset. Ridiculous thing to waste. But that was my first marionette, tangled. And my father untangled things with it. Building up on that. I collected hand puppets, and people gave me hand puppets for presents, Christmas, over 300 of them, and I was doing little shows with them from the age of 7 on. I was doing structured shows with a script or to a pre-recorded, to a record that would play. And so just progressing. The marionettes I didn't start taking really seriously until I was about 11, because they were always tangled for me. But by 11, I started collecting these commercial puppets that were made in England called Pelham puppets. And they were just wonderful. They're very well made.
Yeah.
And so I would start doing shows with them, collecting those. And then my mother helped me build a small stage in the basement, a permanent marionette stage. And we could actually invite in neighbor children. And my best friend was David Herzog, who's a puppeteer in Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah.
And he and I grew up together, and he would come over and we would produce these shows together on this permanent stage. And they would be for special holidays, Easter or Christmas or whatever. We'd put together these shows.
That's amazing.
So all of that was the beginning of going to my professional career, which really, I didn't start building my own marionettes until I was 15. And at that point, I was learning from library books how to do it. And I declared myself professional pretty fast putting together a marionette variety show. And the variety show was easy because I could do it solo by myself. And I could use it for all sorts of different situations, because it wasn't that it had to be a story that would appeal to one group of people or another. It would appeal to anybody.
Right.
And so the Lions Club would hire me, and the Boy Scouts would hire me, and whatever, and I would do shows. And that was the beginning of my professional career at 15.
That's amazing. Do you remember the first time that you got paid to do a puppet show? Not
Really. There were so many early on that I can't remember. I remember
it was
the one big excitement thing that happened to me was they would have a big festival every year in this little town that we grew up in, Dixon, Illinois, and it was called the Petunia Festival. They would line the street with petunias, and they would have a parade, and then what they started doing was a talent show. So they did a talent show that was outside on the track field of the high school, and everybody would sit in the bleachers. And I entered that one year. And I had a dancer that was called Anna Wiggle, and she would just do a dance. And then I had created a brand new marionette that was a ghost, and he was like a break apart skeleton, except he was in black hood and everything. And so the parts of the body would fly out from the clothing. But the big thing was I put batteries up in the control, and he had little lights, Christmas tree lights in his eyes, and they would light up red.
Oh my gosh.
And when I entered the talent show, I was act number 13. And so everybody was ribbing me about it backstage. They were going, oh, I'm so glad I'm not act number 13. That's really lucky. And anyway, I went out at act number 13, and it was just starting to get dusk in the evening. And I did the dancer, and I got great response from the audience. And then I bring out the ghost, and he starts dancing around and flying apart, and the audience goes crazy. And then his eyes light up red, and you could see it so distinctly because it was just getting dark enough.
Oh, perfect.
And so I got just a huge ovation for that, and I won first place.
That's amazing.
$100, which was like $1 million to me at that point, at 16 years old. So that was a big encouragement and a big excitement for me, and that kind of helped propel me forward again in my professional career.
That's amazing. What were you going to say?
We have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely not from your dad.
Oh, right.
Who's wondering what Philip's parents said when he said he was going to be a puppeteer.
Yeah, last week I had my dad on the show and chatted with him a little bit about being a parent of a puppeteer. And it'd be good to know if you remember what your mom or your dad said when you told them that you were going to be a professional puppeteer.
Well, my father passed away when I was only 8, so I don't think he would have been real happy about it, though, because he kind of ignored what I was doing when I was younger, doing the shows. He didn't pay much attention to that. But my mother was always supportive because she ran a doll hospital, and she had little miniature things, doll clothes, doll props, chairs and stuff, and I would use those in the shows. I would be borrowing them from her doll shop, and she would make costumes for me for the puppets. And I even printed up flyers to advertise my shows. I had a little printing press, and I would sell tickets. I would print tickets, and 5 cents each to come in and see the show, things like that. So I was a real entrepreneur early on with it, and she just got a big kick out of it, and she was very supportive always. The one thing when I finally was ready, when I graduated from high school and I was going to go off to college, and I had already been doing professional shows to help earn extra money around, and I went off to college, and the one thing she said to me before I leave was that she said, be sure and study something that you can earn a living with. So I don't think she entirely trusted that puppetry was going to be that great. And so what I ended up doing was double majoring in college for part of the time anyway. I was a theater major, and that was the thing that I was really passionate about. But I double majored as an education major too, so that I could teach theater in high school is what I thought I could do as a fallback.
That's great.
I had my job offer with a professional puppeteer, Tony Urbano, in Los Angeles. He sent me a plane ticket, and that was 3 days after I graduated. I had that job offer and was flying out. Or not 3 days, I think it was like 1 week after I graduated.
Yeah. That's amazing. Had he seen your work before then?
You'd never know where things are going to come from.
Had Tony Urbano seen your work beforehand? Had he come to one of your shows?
He had. I created a video of my variety show when I was at college, And this was pretty early time in the videos. It was a reel-to-reel video. And I sent it to him. And he took it to the television station where he was doing a television show, Dusty's Treehouse. They played the video, he told me, there in the control room of the television station, and he watched me perform. And he decided that it was worth taking a chance on, and that's why he sent me a plane ticket. He had never done that before, and he told me he would probably never do it again, but he flew me out from Illinois to California to work for him. And I continued working for him for the next 8 years. And that was my advanced degree in puppetry, was working for Tony Urbano.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. That's really amazing. What was working with him like? What kind of things did you start, like when you first got there working for him? Were you assisting on shows, or were you just running coffee, or were you like in building and performing right away?
No, I'm building not so much for performing. When I first went out there, he was doing a show every summer at the Laguna Beach Festival of Arts. And it would be a show that would run the entire summer there, and you'd be doing, I forget, 3 or 4 shows a day, every day while you were there. And he put me right away. I started rehearsing in that show. And the interesting thing is, the new guy, he gave me all the from stage left. Because from stage left, you have to work left-handed with the marionettes to keep the marionette in front of you. I mean, there are ways to avoid that, and I teach people how to do that. But at that point, whatever puppeteer worked from the stage left had to work left-handed. So the first things I was learning left-handed to do, which is really handy. It's good to be ambidextrous as a marionette operator.
Sure.
So he put me in the show, and I did that show for the entire summer. And that was really my test run. He was going to see how I did with the show, and if not, then I had a round trip ticket. So he was going to.
Just as sort of a backup.
I started building the show. I worked my way up and became his production supervisor. I trained all the new puppeteers that came in on how to work the marionettes, and I had to learn all of the parts of all of the shows so that I could go around and I could jump into any show, any part. So the part that Tony would usually do, I could jump into if I needed to. And so that's what it was towards the end before I left him after 8 years.
That's incredible. Where did you go after that?
I had met my partner, David Alexander. He had also worked for Tony Urbano for a period of time. And he suggested that we go out and we start our own company. So that's what we did. And that was in 1980.
Oh, wow. We
established our own company. And of course, the first thing I did was rebuild puppets that I had as a teenager.
Oh, yeah.
So I had to bring them up to snuff, what I thought was the quality that I wanted for that point when I started my own show again. And so that's the first thing I did, was modify all these puppets and change them whatever way I felt could improve them up to the quality I wanted to see. And then I started performing, and some of our first bookings were for shopping centers and malls. And then I decided I wanted to get on the cruise ships, because Tony had started doing cruise ships right towards the end of the time when I was working for him. And that sounded like just a wonderful thing to do, because number one, I always liked doing marionette work as sophisticated theater. And so it was adult audience that was my target audience. And that was really important for me to keep that sophistication. I was offered a lot of shows for children's birthday parties and for school assemblies, things like that, but I really wanted to be in the adult market. And so I worked really hard to build a show for the cruise ships. And that took a while to do. I mean, I had to go and I had to audition right with production supervisors, entertainment directors, shoreside. And I would actually walk into their office with a puppet and my resume and talk about it and try and accepted offers on cruise ships on 3 different lines, and I accepted the top line, which was the top paying line at that time, which was Royal Caribbean Cruise Line.
Nice.
Beyond that, I had just started going with that, and then I had all my puppets stolen from my car in between cruises.
Oh.
So.
Oh no.
And we had just moved to a new house. We had a brand new mortgage and no way to pay for it, and no puppets.
So what did you do?
So I had to go to work for all the other puppeteers in the Los Angeles area. I worked for Bob Baker. I worked for Jim Gamble. And they sustained me while I was rebuilding puppets. And it took me a full year to rebuild enough puppets to have a show that was only 2 minutes long at that point. But then I started selling that show, and I got touring shows that were kind of like circus. They were all circus acts, and they would different cities in Texas. And I did that for a while, and then finally I got back on the cruise ships, but not on the top line cruise ships. I had to start right at the bottom. And so when you're hired on the bottom rung cruise ships, you go on and you have to sell bingo tickets, run bingo, you have to sell horse racing tickets, you have to greet passengers at the gangway. You do all these things, you're staff, basically. You're a staff member who happens to entertain. And it wasn't very nice because people don't treat your entertainment with very much respect because they go, oh, he's just a staff member.
Right, of course.
The top cruise lines in the industry.
Yeah. My gosh, that's incredible. So it took you another year to get back up onto a cruise ship, and then how long before you got to another top of the line ship that you were excited to be on?
I think it was about 3 years before I made it onto Royal Viking Line, and they were one of the premier lines at that point. And they would actually hire you on and keep you on for like 4 months at a time. And so it was wonderful. You would go on, and passengers knew your show after a while. And when they'd come back and do a repeat cruise, it was like family. They wanted to see you again perform. Yeah. And so it was a whole different situation than it is now on the ships. And you were part of a cruise ship family. You knew the other entertainers very well, and you knew so many passengers. And they would have you host at tables in the dining room and great deal to where, again, you became more like crew after a while and less like featured entertainers. But the ultimate was that you were a featured entertainer, and that's all you had to do. And you were really respected for that.
That's amazing.
And so much so,
that's
we had crews that were trying to just work on certain cruise lines. For a while, I was hopping around on all the top lines from one to the other. And finally, Royal Viking wanted me to do exclusive with them, but I wouldn't sign that way because by that time, my career really was starting to expand into a lot of areas. And around that time, I was also offered my first Broadway show with Tommy Tune.
I mean,
so that was a whole new thing.
That's Busker Alley, right? That show?
Yes, that's correct.
That's incredible. What was that process like? Did they audition you, or were you contacted just to be in that show because of your reputation already?
I was contacted just because of my reputation. Tommy Tune actually came on with Jeff Calhoun, who was going to be the director at that time, and he was kind of Tommy's protege. He was learning the business. And they both came on a cruise ship, and Tommy was just came on as a guest celebrity, so he would do lectures and things. But he saw me perform. We on the deck, and Jeff and Tommy would start talking with David and I, and then they left. I thought, oh, well, that was really a fun time. And when we got home, on our answering machine was this message, and it said, "Hi, this is Tommy Toon. We're planning this Broadway show, and we'd really like you to be a part of it. So let me know what you." And I wish I would have saved that recording, because that was just like, I almost fell over when I heard that. But anyway, we went out to New York and we started workshopping the show. And at that point, they did audition me, because Tommy had no idea what my background was. He had seen a couple of puppets that he really liked and didn't know exactly how I was going to fit into the show, except that it was about street entertainers, buskers, right before the war in England, World War II. And so when I first got out there, we went into a dance studio with Jeff, and Tommy would play his part, and I was supposed to have a character that was going to dance with him. So Jeff would choreograph a whole routine between the puppet and Tommy, and then they wanted to see how fast I could pick it up. And of course, they showed it to me, and we did a little work with it, and then we did it. And I performed it with Tommy. And that was all they needed to see. Then I was in the show.
That's amazing.
And so we started workshopping, and it evolved so that one of the puppets would actually play Tommy's character as a boy. And then he would play his own father. And so you would see the background of how he became a busker on the street. And it's the way the puppet would fit in with it. And a puppet that they hadn't planned for was that there was a live dog that was supposed to be in the show. And Tommy didn't know. He hadn't seen Taffy, our little dog, Marionette, on the cruise ship. He had never seen it. And there just happened to be a time they were trying to promote this new show that they were creating. You do your show, and then we're going to say, this is going to be a part of this new Broadway show. So all the touring theater producers came and they saw me perform. And at the end of that, I took Taffy out and walked her around in the audience.
Right.
And Tommy was there, and he went nuts when he really saw everything the dog could do and how it reacted with people.
Yeah.
He said, that's Mate. Mate was the character name for the real dog in the show.
Yeah.
And he'd already lined up a dog trainer who was, I think, rather upset that suddenly he was replaced by a marionette dog. But Taffy became of the show the best reviews. We toured the show for about 8 months, and then it was after the tour. And the unfortunate thing about that was that Tommy slipped and broke his foot within the last week that we were playing in Tampa, Florida. And that was the end of the show. Yeah, couldn't go any further.
That's incredible. That's really, really wild. Here, Katie just handed me, this is the poster for Busker Alley there. Yeah.
Ah,
That's
yeah,
amazing.
there it is.
That's amazing. So that's really, really wild. Okay, so you've been doing, so then after that show closed, did you go, you still had a pretty solid career on cruise ships. Did you went back to doing that for a while?
Oh yeah, whenever there were not other stage shows or things for me to do, I could go back on the ships. But actually another stage show came through. Jerry Mitchell, who is a well-known director and choreographer on Broadway, he was like an assistant choreographer on Busker Alley. Well, he became the choreographer for a Christmas show that was called That's Christmas at the Schubert Theater in Chicago. And it was a big, huge production number. It was supposed to, production show. It was supposed to rival the thing that the like Radio City Music Hall would do with their Christmas shows.
Right.
And so it was being directed by Scott Whitman, and the music was being done by Mark Shaman. So all these people with Jeremy, all three of them putting together, and it was starring Sandy Duncan and Darlene Love. And so that was the very next year after the Broadway show, after Busker Alley collapsed. I was in that show, and I was producing special marionettes for that. There was a Frosty the Snowman that could break apart, and then he could melt and then reconstitute himself, and he danced with all this whole group of singers. Taffy was in the show. She had several key points, and then I made a walrus that was in a number that was somebody singing, "All I want for Christmas is my two front teeth," and then he got his tusks at the end.
That's amazing. Katie, who is just here and a much bigger musical theater fan than I could ever be, is just beside herself that this was part of your life. This is amazing. Here, and she wanted me to show a picture of Taffy as well.
Oh, there's Taffy, yeah.
Very great. She is just a remarkable puppet, incredible marionette.
She is so much fun to deal with. I'm sorry?
How many, so you were asked to you were talking about making specialty puppets just for this production. You know, the productions that I've been asked to be a part of that, you know, they commission a puppet, they always want something very quickly. But I know that you have a pretty, you know, your process is pretty set, and, you know, you go through a lot of revisions on your puppets. Did you have to adapt your design and build process for that commission?
Actually not. You know, with that show, it was amazing because it was Sony Live Entertainment, and they had a big budget, and they had planned way far ahead. So, I mean, we actually met with Scott and Mark at their home in Los Angeles that time to go over some of the ideas for the show early on, and to hear music and things. And they gave me several months to build, which is good because I was building 2 of every marionette. So, which is I like to have for a live show, because if you break a string or something, you aren't struggling along with a bad puppet. You just, that one goes off and you bring out the next marionette. And I try to do that for films now too as well. Yeah, it's a good safety measure. So I had 2 of every puppet, and I'm not exactly a fast builder. I had a small studio in my garage at that time in Pasadena, California, and so they gave me enough time to do it. So I got everything finished.
That's great.
And yeah, it was wonderful. I can tell you that the show was so spectacular, so huge, that they actually had set pieces that wouldn't even fit in the theater. They didn't have room for them later. And so they cut things, and they needed more time for scene changes than they thought they would. So at one point, they even asked for Taffy to come out and improvise. But there was a little boy that was in the show, played one of the kids that were involved in the cast, and they had a whole scene that Jerry asked me to improvise with the little boy, where he'd bring out a gift package. And Taffy would come out on stage, and she'd get excited, and she'd grab the ribbon and untie the package and open it up. And then the little boy would reach in, and he had a gift for Taffy, and it was a red nose for Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And I think there were antlers, too. I forget that he put antlers on her.
I mean, just listening to that story and knowing what I know about marionettes, the amazing part about that story is that Taffy grabbed a thing and pulled it. That's the part that blows my mind. Is how that's really
easy. She did that in Busker Alley too. At one point, there was a scene where there was a birthday party, and she unwrapped the package. So we of course, we always told people, you know, these are the tricks that she's capable of doing. So if you have a place where you need these things, do it. So that's how we came up with this thing. But anyway, she would look all dejected and sad, and she would do takes to the conductor down in the orchestra pit during this thing too. And then the boy would get up with the package, and they'd both go running off. And that was enough extra time for them to change the set for the next scene.
That's amazing.
That's the fun thing about live theater, you know.
Now, you mentioned that
adapt for all the...
Yeah. You mentioned that in addition to like these big stage shows that you've done some films as well, and I think, you know, a lot of a lot of recognition goes to your work in Being John Malkovich. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved in that film? Because I know you weren't originally cast as the puppeteer in that movie. Is that right?
Well, I'm going to try and simplify it down because there was a long, drawn-out process of what went on. They were looking for a puppeteer. They were interested in it, and we got a call out of nowhere, and it was one of the producers and the director, and they said, we'd like to come visit you and see your workshop. And so we said, sure. We were in Pasadena, California. Mm-hmm. So Spike Jonze and one of the producers came out, and also a guy that was in charge of the scenic design in the film, too. And they came to my workshop, and I had a garage that was turned into a puppet studio. And so I showed him the puppets and everything, and Spike got very excited about everything he was seeing there. And I showed them the Pierrot on the tightrope, which he just freaked out over, and my violinist.
Yeah.
And he said, I want you to be working on this film. And I said, oh, great. I said, I'd love to read a script, of course. So then they gave me a script, and I read it. And it was just the weirdest script I'd ever read. I didn't know what to make of it. And I was going, I was kind of waiting for a Sound of Music where Bill Baird had this wonderful marionette.
Right.
But the thing about it was that the marionettes, the puppets, were really important to the script.
Right.
It was so crucial to it because the guy was a puppeteer.
Right. And
you had to believe he was a good puppeteer because when he went inside the head of John Malkovich, he had to be able to control him.
Right.
So you had to figure, okay, he knows how to do these things.
Right.
And from being a marionettist to controlling inside somebody's head. So anyway, I really liked it, so I was very interested in it. But then they said, oh, well, we're going to start filming in, I forget exactly the length of time. I think it was a month and a half to 3 months they were going to start filming. Mm-hmm. So you had to build all the puppets. You were supposed to train the actors so that they could handle the puppets properly. But then you had to work out all of the scenes that they needed. Right. And the scenes were complicated.
Yes.
And I said to Spike, oh, you need to shoot these separately. I said, just have them done separately without any actors around because you really have to focus on them. He wanted to stop when he was doing the live scenes and go over to another place in the studio and shoot the puppet scenes really fast and then go back to the live. And I said, it's not a good idea. And I said, of course, in order to get the choreography perfect so that the puppet mimics exactly what the human does, you want to find out everything the puppet can do well. I'll put them together in a choreographed piece, and then you have the live actor duplicate that.
Right. Not the other way around.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those are the plans we had for it. Well, they needed things done so fast, and I couldn't do it, basically. We gave them an estimate of what it would cost. I would have to bring in special people and stuff, and they didn't like that. They were a low-budget film. Mm-hmm. So they kind of said, well, you're an advisor right now, and they called us in for several advice sessions, and we told them how the size of the puppets, how they should be, and how they might be constructed that would be really good for them, mm-hmm. things like that. And then we left. Mm-hmm. And they held a big cattle call audition. They didn't hire any of the puppeteers in the cattle call audition, and they ended up hiring Images in Motion in Northern California. Mm-hmm. And they didn't have experience with marionettes. They had done stop-motion puppets. But anyway, they built the puppets, and they went in and they shot the film. And I went off and I did the cruises and everything else. I came back, and I thought, okay, I was so excited about that film because I thought I was perfect for what they needed. Yeah. I had the experience and things like that. And I thought, well, it's gone. The other people have done it. And all of a sudden I get a call from Spike, and this is several months later, and he says, we'd like you to come and do some work on the film. And I said, I didn't build the puppets, so you need to send them to me because I don't know how they work. And I want to check that. And so he did. And then he said, you have to create this dance of despair and disillusionment. And this is the one that I said create the puppet choreography first. Well, no, they didn't. They did all these acrobatic things and crazy stuff. Wall walks, backflips, forward somersaults, running and stopping in a pose.
Yeah.
Everything a marionette does not do well.
Right. Right.
Well, I think I can do almost everything that you want. I need to rebuild the puppets because they weren't jointed to do the things they needed to do. And I said, I'll need lots of time to do this. Well, they had already finished all principal photography, basically, and they were just editing the film at that point, and they were just going to put in the puppet sequences.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, okay, we're going to delay getting a studio to do the puppet things until you're ready. They set up the little sets in my garage. They gave me like a month to rebuild the puppets and everything, and then they would rehearse with them. And Spike came in, and he would talk to me, and he'd look at the rehearsal and see how it was going, and then he'd go off. I got everything that he wanted except for the forward somersault and back handspring.
Uh-huh.
There was a second puppet that was built as a stunt double that needed to be modified to do those things, but I couldn't find a way to do it. And I said to Spike, I don't think that can be done with a marionette. I said, what I need is I'll start the somersault, and when it gets into the tuck and down the ground, stop camera, I'll bring up the strings, and then I'll bring it up out of it. He said, no, I don't want to do that. He said, I want this to be the most spectacular marionette performance that you've ever seen. I want it complete. And I said, I can't make any promises, but I said, I'll do my best. And so they had a scheduled time now for the studio, and I forget, I had a week or two. 3 days before I was supposed to go in, lots of things seem to happen to me in threes. 3 days before I went to go into the studio, I could picture what I needed to do to make it do a somersault. And I built it. It was the simplest thing, just 2 pieces of doweling and strings at key points on the puppet. And one control would do one thing, and then the other control would take over. So you'd start out with your arms all contorted, and then it would go out, and when you were ended, you were contorted in a different way. But the first time I tried it, when I put it all together and strung it up, the first time I tried it, it worked. I went, oh my God, I've got it. And what I found is I could reverse the process, and he could get a back handspring out of it. So he was capable of those 2 moves with that control. And so I went in, we could shoot that. But for a long time, I just had no idea how I was going to do that.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And it really is one of the most incredible pieces of marionette performance, and luckily it's on film so we can watch it anytime. Like it really truly is amazing.
It still took about 17 takes to get a really good one, because even though he could do all the movements, he would fall off center. His body would go a little bit off angle, and it wouldn't look good. So when he was like coming out of it, he would start to fall off center, and I just had to work so hard to balance him, because the strings weren't in a lot of different places, in certain line, in a certain parallel.
It's really
but
amazing.
Yeah, it was a
so
fun project.
Yeah, that's really
overall.
Wild. I have one last question I want to talk to you a little bit about, because I know we've worked together on another project that you were part of called Don't Trust Anyone Over 30, which was an Art Basel Miami art piece. And like I said, yes, there we are.
You show
exactly.
You show pictures of my stuff. I show pictures of you working a puppet.
100% fair. Well, I remember you when we were working that you talked about how, you know, your experience of going to a Puppetry of America festival really changed how, you know, it sort of opened up your eyes to all these other people that were interested in puppetry, and that was, you know, very special for you. I had a very similar experience going to the O'Neill, and, you know, for the first time I think I was 18 when I went for the O'Neill the first time, like meeting puppeteers. Like, it was the first time I was surrounded by people who were interested in puppetry, this thing that I thought was only for me. And you've been a part of the puppetry community for so long, both as part of P of A and the O'Neill Festival, and just, you know, having such a long and successful career and visible career in puppetry. I'm interested to know, like, what you've seen change in the puppetry community. You talked a little bit about how the sort of cruise ship, you know, cruise ships have changed a little bit. I want to know if you've seen any changes with how the, like, community of puppeteers have gathered or have interacted in the last, you know, in the last year, couple of years.
The changes that I see, for the most part, I still find festivals so exciting, and I think it's so important to get together. I think the changes are what the social media does now, which is, in a way, it lulls people into thinking this is the only interaction we need. And I mean, we're really grateful for what we have now because of the situation with COVID-19, but it needs to be much more than this. Not all puppetry translates well on a screen without having audience and being right there and experiencing it.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I've turned down several offers to perform something on video. And it's just because I feel like I can't do it well enough. For one thing, I don't have the right technical equipment here and stuff to have everything look really good. Mm-hmm. And once I don't have that audience with me, it's not the same. It deadens it a lot. So I just think that younger puppeteers need to experience more of the festivals, more of getting out and talking with other people one-on-one, really live, and seeing people's workshops and stuff. It's nice we can do some of that on video, which is fun. But we still need those festivals where we can share, watch the live shows, and experience that and talk with people and have give and take right on. That's the most important thing, I think, to hold on to, and I hope we won't lose that.
Yeah.
I think young puppeteers are doing so much interesting material with a lot of experimentation, with a lot of the electronics and all these other things they're bringing into it, where you can coordinate a live puppet with something that's happening on a screen with them. Things like that, just magnificent things that are being done, and that's very exciting. You know, we're only limited by our imagination, is what I always say with puppetry, and so we haven't even hardly scratched the surface, I think, of what we can see and will see. And of course, the puppetry that's made for film, gorgeous. Then go with it, you know, and to have that and to have the new things, the new technology that can add so much to that. It was fun for me to be able to work on Oz the Great and Powerful, because here was the chance of having a marionette create a performance that then was going to be translated into a CGI character.
Right.
And so you're taking advantage of another, what you would call low-tech technology, but a high-tech technology. And I think it's important for the puppeteer to have a direct connection to the puppet. That's when the heart and the soul come through, whether it's rods or through your hands or through the strings. That happens when the puppeteer is right there connected to it. And that's so important, because a puppet doesn't mean nearly as much to people if it becomes just a mechanical thing. Mm-hmm. The animatronic things you see are nice, but they don't have that soul. Mm-hmm. They don't have that quality of heart to them. And they can always duplicate a performance exactly. But, you know, it's the serendipity, little nuances a puppeteer can bring to an object. And that's called prop handlers or just technicians. We are actors first and foremost. This is a theatrical art form. And if we don't treat it as that, then we are losing a lot of what makes this special.
Yeah. Phillip, that is an incredible note to end on. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's really great to see your face. I know we had some technical troubles, and I think we worked through it okay, and hopefully we'll get to talk to you face-to-face soon.
Yes, I would love that. I hope so too. Yeah, I'm counting on the fact that we can all get together sometime at festivals and things like that.
Exactly.
It's been a joy, Eric. It's wonderful the chances that we've had to work together.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited about the things you're doing with Puppet Kitchen. I think you guys are terrific, and I'm excited for the future. I think that we are going to continue and we're going to expand and see wonderful things in the future with puppetry. So. And if there were problems here, it was because I couldn't actually hear what you were saying because it became garbled.
It was very buggy. I think, you know, everything about this conversation has made the point that an in-person meeting is not the same as a video chat.
Yes, that's for sure. So I was trying not to talk over you and not to miss what you were trying to say to me.
This has been great. Thank you so much for being here. And
my pleasure.
You. I'll talk to you soon.
Great. Take care. Take care, everybody.
Well, thank you so much, Phillip. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today for another wonderful Puppet Time Online. You know, we're right at the end of our time here. And so I want to give a couple of shout outs. I want to first give a shout out to the New York City Blood Drive. Katie and I are signed up to go donate blood. And if anyone out there, if you can donate blood, then you should go and do that. There's a lot of need for that these days. I also want to give a shout out to the Drama League, which is hosting a conversation between Michael Mayer, Jonathan Groff, and Christian Borle about Little Shop of Horrors starting now. You can go find it at dramaleague.org, or you're already on Instagram. Go to the Little Shop of Horrors Instagram, Little Shop NYC.
We also have a promo for next week's guest.
Oh yes, next week's guest is going to be
Julia Miller.
Julia Miller from Manual Cinema. Oh, and I'm really excited about that. So until next time, just remember, you don't have to do everything to do something. Catch you next time.